historical context, cultural context, why does context matter? If a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick, a throw is a throw, why does context matter? Hey everybody, this is Vincent Tung, the Wandering Warrior. Now, you guys know I'm not only a martial artist, I'm also a researcher. You can call me a hoplologist, right? Let that sink in. Basically, I not only practice the martial arts, I not only test myself in fighting, but I also deeply research and immerse within the history and the culture behind the martial arts. See, one of the unique things about me is I take a multidisciplinary view of these things. It's about the environment, the history, the culture, the kinesiology or the athletics of things, and the martial arts themselves, right? It's not just any one thing, it's all of it. Because everything is, in fact, interrelated. And of course, with the traditional martial arts, with these folk fighting arts, they come from a cultural context, right? So people ask me, oh, why is it important that you research this stuff? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? A lot of people don't, and that's okay. But why do I do it? I'm sure for the people in the Qing dynasty of China, they weren't thinking about this stuff that much. They were in it. They need to kill someone tomorrow. They were just practicing the art that was a result of their context, that was ongoing. They were in it. They were living in it, right? But now we have something that's passed down from a different time, from a somewhat different culture, from a different context. And yet, despite a lot of people not really being able to bang these days, not really being able to fight, despite that fact, these arts still contain a lot of useful fight knowledge and techniques. So good things were passed down, but things aren't being transmitted just right. So how can we figure that out? If you want to understand the doctrine, the strategic doctrine, the movement methodology, and the pedagogy, the teaching and training method, the transmission method of these arts, and why it works and how it might not work, then it's important for us to understand the context. First, let's ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this art? Right? How did it develop and evolve? What was it supposed to do in terms of giving you skills or violent solutions? Right? What is the overall strategic doctrine of this system? See, not all fighting is the exact same. There's different goals. There's different ways to get different results. And remember, in the late Qing dynasty, martial artists were out killing people. They were bandits. They were bodyguards. They were training people for the military exams, or they were taking part in the military exams so they could become commanders in the military. They were also dueling on raised platforms called leitai. So don't let them tell you that there was never a sort of sport or dueling aspect to the Chinese martial arts. There were, right? But they were also sometimes brawling in the streets. Sometimes they were gangsters. Sometimes they were guilds fighting against other guilds for the same resources. Maybe not that far from gang warfare. Either way, these are many different types of violence. So was this a concise art that was meant to be taught to, say, bodyguards as a way to quickly knock down an enemy? Say if you dropped your weapon or didn't get it out in time? If so, maybe it has some essential striking vectors with a power generation and footwork, and some additional tactics and techniques such as throws, locks, kicks, to kind of help round you out. Was this meant to be a quick self-defense art, to get in, misalign an opponent's arms, and bludgeon down their center line and then run away? Maybe that was. Was this meant to be a powerful, long-range striking method with some throws and some other stuff like that to counter kicking and striking, but also with the ability to angle off and throw really heavy knockout punches to people that are trying to get too close, trying to wrestle, getting a little foolhardy with their distancing? Maybe. Or maybe it's a mixed striking system that gets you in range for clinch fighting. And that's especially useful if you know your enemies might have weapons on them. So controlling the arms and the head are really important to make sure that you can dominate their posture so that they can't get their weapon out and kill you with it. Yeah, perfectly viable, right? Maybe it's a system to force the bridging of the arms and win with a combination of strikes and throws. Assuming that your bodyguard's lost and you're unable to get your sidearm out in time, or maybe you're having a gentlemanly duel where you're, crossing the wrists and fighting from a bridged position, almost like modern day push hands or toiso, except you're also going to pummel the shit out of them and knock them off the platform. Maybe, right? It could be that your art is ideal for brawling. Like you really use a lot of these gross motor motions to close off the lines of attack, and use swift clawing and gouging and hard striking and quick breaks and a few sweeps and throws to break apart and knock down your opponents. You know, and it's involved in gang, street brawling, and warfare. It's not really dueling. It's not really self-defense. You're just getting into brawls. That's valid. That is a type of fighting, right? And some arts even have a doctrine of sort of like rapid level changing. Maybe you're going to pull a drop kick on somebody, then drop down, try to do a quick like sweep of their legs, then get back to regular fighting and then drop back down, right? A lot of level changing and very focused on one-on-one dueling or even criminal behavior. These are all valid, you know? So by understanding the context of the art, we can understand what the doctrine is and how all the techniques actually fit into that strategic doctrine, the approach of this method. We can understand why this art has its own proportion of ti da shuai na, right? It might be more striking oriented. It might be more wrestling oriented. It might be blending both. It might be blending both under different circumstances. Understanding the context helps us understand the doctrine, and therefore how we should align our training if we want to get the attributes and the skills of the art. So if you try to take something that was meant for clinch fighting, for example, and you try to use it purely in modern Western boxing, you're going to be restricting yourself to a very small portion of the game. And you're training for a context that art was never meant for, right? So yes, fighting is fighting, but you know, assassination versus self-defense versus brawling versus dueling, they're all different contexts. And many of these arts had to cover more than one of those bases, but they may have had one as their primary focus. Okay, keep that in mind. So movement, right? The movement language of an art can be better embodied if you understand its context. What do I mean by that? Well, Chinese martial arts have a lot of 基本功 or fundamental training. This gongfu ingrains certain body mechanics into you. Now, culture comes from lifestyle, and the lifestyle imprints certain movements and power chains in your body. Did the boxers often come from like a agricultural or farming background? Were they fishermen? Were they sailors? Did this art involve nobles who had the luxury to spend time working on their athletics and strength and martial arts skills? Or was it done by farmers as a way to end their day's work, right, in the evening? Was this meant to be trained by children to mold them as they grew up? Or was it taught to adults and to give them kind of like a quick way to learn certain fighting skills? Maybe your system is not a system, but it's actually like someone's personal fighting style. And that's going to be heavily influenced by their body type, their temperament, and the kinds of opponents that they themselves faced. So it might not really be a perfect match for you. Context. You know, most of these arts had 1, 2, maybe 3 taolu, or forms, sequences. They're called kata in Japanese. That's going to be a very important factor. What are those forms? Are they sets of combinations to use against your opponents? Right? A lot of mantis boxing, a lot of long fist styled boxing is based on that concept of combinations. Are they generalized movements to ingrain certain mechanics and attributes into your fighting? A lot of the southern arts from Fujian province, a lot of sanzan is kind of based on that mentality, right? Are they forms meant to help you repetitively optimize a handful of movements? Baji Quan, Xingyi Quan especially tends to take that approach. A lot of these Hui guys or these particular strains of northern Chinese boxing tend to work on specific moves repetitively and really work on the power generation of those, not so much on pure combinations, right? Are these forms a mix of calisthenics and isometric holds with fighting techniques? Because that's going to be different too, right? And some of the Cantonese arts are like that. Does the form have acrobatics that were meant more as a form of martial arts entertainment in the Qing Dynasty marketplaces? Yes, some of them are like that. In fact, Eagle Claw is known for that, right? Does the form have like a public version and a private closed door version that has the actual techniques and tactics spelled out? Yeah, some systems are like that too. And which version did you learn, right? Why that these arts have differences in their forms comes down to the context, right? Yes, the forms got inflated in the 1900s. A lot of systems ended up having a lot of forms that were just rehashed techniques and moves so the teacher could keep the students around longer, keep taking tuition money. If you're learning one of those forms, it may have limited use to you because it's not necessarily there to build up your fighting skills. So even though they all stem from the Han Chinese civilization and have that concept of Tao Lu, each Chinese ethno-linguistic group had its own cultural norms, and many of these boxing systems have their own takes on what is Tao Lu, and therefore what is the fundamental builder of your body method, your movement, the way you fight, right? Not even talking about techniques, just the way you fucking move. So that gets us into the training, right? The method behind the training, the pedagogy, and its pros and cons can be accounted for if you understand the context. How can you embody the ethos of the system if you don't understand its context and its purpose of its training methods? Are there certain body alignment and structure exercises? Is it because this is a bare knuckle art with a high chance of grappling, so keeping your hands safe while striking and framing against your opponent is a good idea? Yeah, probably. Probably for almost all of them, right? They're probably not meant for modern day 16-ounce gloves. Many systems had more sparring time, not with empty hands, but with staff fighting. If your sense of range and timing was honed in staff fighting, it's going to influence how you enter and strike and how you bridge and control. And if you want those attributes, you should spend time in staff fighting, the Chinese way, right? And that's going to influence your whole mentality towards the fight. It's not going to be, oh, let me go 12 rounds and stick and move, stick and move. You're going to think, how can I go in there and break the closest thing, bridge and control their weapon or their arms, and break their body? It's a different mentality. It's not right or wrong. That depends on context, right? Is this a system that's meant to be layered on top of other skills? Maybe, say, 八卦掌. People were getting good at 形意拳 or 摔跤 before they got into 八卦掌. It was meant to be a kind of finishing school for you to personally develop even greater body movement and variability in your tactics and techniques. Okay, that's something to consider. Maybe don't start with 八卦, right? Maybe start with 摔跤. Are some of the practices actually compromises because the boxers didn't have the money or resources or medical care to train in a more ideal fashion? Maybe because of that, there's not a lot of sparring, but there's a lot of paired drills to get you as close to sparring as possible without actually sparring, because if you knocked out some teeth, if you broke a hand, if you snapped something, a clavicle, that could be bad. Or 八打八不打, like in Mantis boxing, the 8 hits, 8 don't hit. Maybe you are substituting vital target hits with things that were less lethal so that you could actually practice it live. Something to think about, right? Are some of the practices actually part of the Chinese folk religion or shamanism, and they are more like spiritual or psychological rituals rather than fighting or athletics? That can absolutely be the case. And remember, if you're in a shamanistic society, psyching yourself up in those type of spiritual methods can help you gain the mental edge in a fight, in warfare. Most militaries and paramilitaries and tribal militaries and warrior groups find ways of psychologically fortifying their fighters. Chinese were no different. And in the modern day, it's still a useful thing, but do you understand the cultural context and do you come from that? Is it going to affect you in the same way, in the way that you want? You know? And you should also ask yourself, did the system begin to decay? You know, did it lose its context, right? The context is sometimes not easy to understand. History is often taught in a boring way, and culture is often not well defined. Usually it's kind of something you feel and you kind of implicitly understand, but otherwise sometimes there's a lot of stereotypes and generalizations. Maybe it's your heritage, but the culture's changed so much with industrialization and urbanization. Maybe it's not even your culture and you're exploring something completely alien and new to you. You know, with the changing times and socioeconomics and some selfishness from certain Chinese martial arts masters, there's a lot of these boxing arts that were not passed down very well, and they are decaying. So it's possible you were taught something that has a bit of damage in its DNA, so to speak, in addition to having been removed from its original context. Things that work tend to have made sense in their context. If they're not working now, something is off, and we need to extract the essentials from the traditional context into the modern day in the right way, with advancements in teaching methodology, with understanding that we're teaching modern humans that are growing up in a different context if we want to revitalize the Chinese martial arts. And I, for one, that is one of my missions on my martial arts journey, I, for one, wish to see the revitalization of traditional Chinese boxing. Maybe not all of them, that's quite a lofty goal, but I can at least speak for the stuff I have a background in. Right? I have a mix of 7-star and 8-step mantis boxing, Tangang and 7-star has a base in Changquan, long fist or long boxing. And I've been training now in Southern style Taizu Quan, Taizougun, Emperor's Fist. Right? So within the things that I do, I plan to make a difference. And on that note, I'm going to be creating learning systems online for you guys. One of which is going to break down long fist movement and mechanics to their base parts. I'm also going to be working on Tan Tui Lu, the 12 roads of Tan Tui, which was a really important form in the northern Chinese martial arts, and it kind of encapsulates the essentials of long boxing or Changquan, long fist style movement and fighting repertoire in terms of techniques and doctrine. And I'm going to be breaking it down for you, the context, how to train it, a combination of the traditional with the modern understandings of psychology. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Guys, sound out down below if you have any of your own revelations or your own questions or comments regarding the context of Chinese martial arts and Chinese boxing and how our understanding of that can improve Chinese boxing's future. In any case, like, share, subscribe if you appreciate the kind of work I'm putting into all this. I thank you for joining me on my journey. I salute yours. Peace.